Hey, Foxy listener, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode number 48, Annex Coworking. Do you ever wonder what that is? We're going to speak with Carrie Hill and find out exactly how beneficial this service is.
Welcome to Fox Talks Business Podcast with your host, Tanya Fox. Tanya has been an entrepreneur for over 20 years, owning retail, service, and franchise. She holds no punches and is never afraid to talk about the nitty-gritty. Together, you'll explore the good, the bad, and the motivational of business life, turning obstacles into opportunities and failures into successes. So grab your favorite drink and let's have some fun. Here's your host, speaker, crafter, and collaborator, Tanya Fox.
So my guest today is Carrie Hill. She has a master's degree in counseling and has worked as a counselor, social worker, photo stylist, and crafter, which is true to my heart. But she really found her purpose when she opened Annex Coworking, which is a female-focused co-working community in San Antonio, Texas. She absolutely loves creating room for women to connect, collaborate, and grow. And you know all how much I love collaboration. Her most recent venture is an online community that is helping women get off the emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship and really grow their businesses. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today, Carrie. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
I'm so excited to be here.
So when I was doing a little bit of research on you, I, of course, came across the annex that you had. And so I really want you to talk, tell us a little bit about how that all came to be, like how that all started, and then a little bit about what it is for those people that aren't too sure what I'm talking about.
Sure. So Annex Coworking is a female-focused co-working space, and it's located in San Antonio, Texas, where I live. And it's basically just what it sounds like. It's a co-working space for women who are business owners or sometimes remote workers. But the purpose is really to be a supportive community for women who are, starting a business is a nightmare, so let's just do it together. And so it came to be because it's not my idea. I was actually a member of a similar space when I lived in Oklahoma a few years ago. Okay. So shout out to Amber from the Collective in Edmond, Oklahoma. She did invent this idea, and I was her first member when I had a different business there. And it just changed my life. Prior to that, I felt very isolated, and I always felt like a failure when I was trying to make my business happen. But once I joined there, everything felt different. And so it's a very powerful thing.
So when I know you had talked about like having other businesses beforehand, and that's a big thing that we hear a lot, especially with people that have a business that isn't necessarily, say, like a retail location. So what were some of the things that you really noticed that helped you to get out of that feeling of isolation, but also that feeling of loneliness, which happens so much?
For sure. It was really just because I was connecting with other people. So I think generally speaking, we isolate probably especially women, we isolate when we're starting a business because we feel like no one understands what we're going through. And we also have all the weight of the business on our shoulders. And so I just think that stress and that there's some shame and guilt that comes with that. I think that makes us isolate even more than we need to. So when I joined a community, I met 20 other women who were in the exact same space that I was. They also felt terrible when something didn't go right. They also were questioning if they had the ability to do this. And that changed everything.
Yeah. So do you find that for you, it was just that sense of feeling like that you weren't alone? Like, did you feel a lot that like no one else is going through this? It's just tough for me.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think when we realize that other people are going through an experience, that takes out a lot of pain out of it because, I'm not alone. Everyone feels this way. So that means I'm not a failure just because I feel this way. Everyone feels this way. It's just part of the process. And we can carry that burden together instead of me trying to drag it alone.
And I think that that's so key too, because I think that we get into these moments of, especially with social media, the way it is, that we see all of the highlight reels and we don't see all of the, the nights spent curled up under your desk crying and trying to figure out, why am I doing this? And I think that that community is key. And, before our guests come on, we always ask them, what one of the most memorable pieces of advice that they get. And I loved yours. You had said, embrace who you are. I think we are most successful when we figure out what our secret sauce is and use it to help people around us. Can you expand a little bit on that for us, what that means to you?
Yeah, so I think so. My very first business was a franchise, and for me, that was amazing because it was all decided for me. I'm not an idea person, so that was amazing. But the part that was challenging is I felt I was trying to fit myself into a box that maybe didn't perfectly fit me,
Right.
and so through the process of business ownership, it makes you figure yourself out. Your strengths and your weaknesses are right there under a huge spotlight. And so I think as I learn more about who I am and what my strengths are, I could really focus my business to focus on those things, and then I could excel better. Like, I am great at encouraging people. I'm great at relationship building. I'm a former counselor, so that's my wheelhouse. And so if I can focus a business on those things, then I'm going to be more successful because I'm going to always be in my area of strength. Most of the time, be in my area of strength.
Right. So, you have an online course and community that's coming up, that's going to be launching in February. So tell us a little bit about what that's all about.
So it's kind of all the same stuff we're talking about here, in that, when we start a business, especially women, we doubt ourselves, we feel terrible, we feel isolated. And so I've done that a couple times now, and I feel like I'm great at that first year. I think the first year is the worst, because you don't see a lot of results for the work that you're putting in. You're just putting
Yeah.
in work, putting in work, putting in work. And then I think in year two, you tend generally to start seeing some positive results from that. But the first year is especially hard. So I wanted to create a course where I could use my counseling background and the information that I know from that, and my experience doing this a couple times, to help other women who are in that first year, who are feeling isolated, who are feeling like a failure, who are feeling they don't have what it takes. And the course gives specific strategies to set them up for success. So there's specific strategies like, okay, you're going to have a really crappy day when everything's falling apart. Here's what you're going to do on that day, so that you
Right.
don't give up and bail or make a huge mistake.
And then what about the community side of it? Like, what is your sort of vision for that aspect? Because like you said, isolation is such a big thing, especially in that first year.
Exactly. So it's the same thing we said. So community is critical because you need to know that other people are going through what you're experiencing, and then you can help each other out, right? So it's an online community. It's formatted like a Facebook group, but it's not on Facebook, because I feel like Facebook is like this toxic place. It's just not a
It
cool place
can
to
be,
be.
yes.
So I'm trying to keep it away from Facebook. And so it's structured like a Facebook community. So if you aren't connected with people in your immediate area, and also to supplement your local relationships, you've got people who you can just bring up questions with, talk over problems, who understand your experience, what you're going through, and also have taken the same course. So they know all the strategies that we have talked about and how to implement them. And so you can coach each other along that way. And so each week, so the group will be going on during the course, and then after the course is over, the community will continue. And so each week there'll be content that I'm providing to kind of coach and help in that. But also, people can kind of run with it as they want, as they would in any like online group.
Right. And I always find people's stories of how how their career and how their objectives, in business sort of go. Now you, as we had said in your bio, have a master's degree in counseling. So how did you get from wanting to do that with your life to where you are now? Can you sort of take us along your story of your journey a little bit?
For sure, for sure. So I got a bachelor's degree in human services, at the traditional time, right after high school. And then I worked in foster care for about 10 years. In the middle of that, I got my master's degree because I wanted to be a counselor. And because I love helping people and supporting people, that's just kind of in my DNA. So I loved that work. I worked primarily with women who had experienced like sexual abuse or trauma, or children who had experienced those things. So it was some intense work, but I thought I was doing great. I lived in Colorado at that time. I moved to Oklahoma for a couple years, and I wasn't licensed as a counselor there. So I
Okay.
couldn't immediately work as a counselor. So I got a different job, and I had intended to get my licensure, but after about a month away from it, when I started thinking about it, I felt nauseated thinking
Because
about it.
that's a hard Like, it's not easy to be around that all of the time.
Apparently not.
Especially
I
when you
thought I
go
was
out, right?
fine. Oh my gosh, I thought I was fine because you learn when you go to school for these things, you learn how to set boundaries, how to do self-care. I thought I was fine, but I was not fine.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, gonna have to come up with a plan B. So while I lived in Oklahoma, I worked at Hobby Lobby corporate and made crafts and got paid for it, which was a great couple of years.
Hey, I used to own a craft retail store. I'm all about
Really?
that. I loved that when I saw it. I was like, yes, she said the two words that are like my favorite words, crafting and collaboration. That was it. Like,
We
I'm
gotta
in.
talk crafts after this. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
absolutely. And
Okay.
Hobby Lobby, whenever I get to the States, that's one of my stops because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
how much trouble can I get in here?
Exactly. It is dangerous for sure. Yeah, so I did that. And then I had the opportunity to work at a personal assistant service. I just got a job as a personal assistant because it just seemed fun. It was helping people. And through that job, I was able to open a franchise associated with it. So I was the beta test, the first franchisee for that business. And so that was really my first time doing the business thing. And so that's when I really had all those tough emotional experiences. And I think that definitely planted the seed there for what I'm doing now. So then I had to move again. So now I'm in San Antonio, Texas, and we came here for my husband's job. And so I was excited to move here because I knew I wanted to create that co-working space that I had been a part of in Oklahoma. I wanted to create that same positive space and that same service for the women in my new city.
And I think that it's such a great idea because, yeah, I think that it's easy. Like, it's nice when you obviously have, you can work from home, but it gets hard because you end up sucking yourself into this isolation. And we think that, you know, social media or connecting that way is enough. But it really isn't. And I'm sure you know that, you know, just with your counseling background of, you know, so if you could give our audience some tips on how to really even maybe recognize that they're isolating themselves. Because I think sometimes people don't realize it until all of a sudden they look around and they go, oh, what happened? How the hell did I get here?
That's the work from home thing. So I did that
Yeah.
for maybe, I didn't do it very long. I did it for maybe 6 months, but I remember at first I was like, was kind of stir crazy. I was like, I'm always alone. I'm always alone. But then a couple months in, I didn't ever want to leave the house. And then you stop getting dressed and you stop showering. And if you haven't showered in a couple of days, that's how you know you're isolated. So there's some practical things you can look at, like how often am I seeing people? And that can differ versus if you're introverted or extroverted as to how much you want to see people, right? I'm introverted, so I don't need a ton of contact. But I think just practically, how often are you seeing people and is it enough? And then I think how you feel. If you're feeling like the whole world is on your shoulders, then you're not connecting enough with other people. Because if you connect with other people, automatically you will share each other's burdens. That's just what happens when in a healthy relationship. If you're connecting with someone, they're going to carry some of that and you're not going to feel so bad.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think what I saw a lot, like even in myself, like, you know, when I think back when I first started and I was at home, I also found I stopped doing some of the, like when we were talking about crafting, I stopped doing all of those hobbies. Like I just worked all the time because it was an easy thing to do. Right. And at that time I didn't have I didn't have kids or anything to pull me away. So it was really easy to like morning and night. Like it's just
Yes,
that
I think
became my
that's
life.
true. Like the boundaries can get, if you're working from home, which is amazing for some people for sure. I have lots of members who work from home, but come here one day a week because it can give them that emotional connection and stuff that they need. But, there's no boundaries when you're working from home. So
Yeah.
like, it's all one big mush of like laundry and groceries and work. And so it's really hard to say I'm done working right now, which is hard anyway. When you're an entrepreneur, I know personally, like I tend to feel like, well, if the business isn't where I want it to be, I'm the only one who can get it there. So I should 100% always be working on it.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to turn my brain off. And that's even harder when you're isolated at home because there's no like natural boundaries to stop it.
Yeah. And it took me a long time. Like, and I remember even the shifts too. Like I said, I had owned a retail craft store and I was in it most of the time. So by the time I sold that after 5 years, I wanted the isolation.
I bet.
I am done with, and I don't want to say people. I wasn't done with people. I was done with customers. And I really learned the difference between humans and customers. I think that something happens when people walk through a door of a retail store that they stop being human. Because I would get the oddest questions that would make me go, I don't think I should be doing this anymore. Because I'm sarcastic by nature usually, but I know when to shut it off. And I was losing that. Like people would come in, it would be like 8 a.m. All the lights at the store were off, but I was waiting for a delivery. And they would be like, it's really hard to shop when it was dark. And when I first started, I would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. We're not really open yet. And I was like, well, we're not open. That's why there's no lights on. Like, it was just, I lost that filter and I was like, I think it's time to go back into the cave. A little bit.
I agree with that. I have 2 points about that. One, everyone should have to work some kind of customer service job in their lifetime.
Absolutely.
Then you're a lot nicer when you're the customer. I swear that's true. But second of all, it's like the role. I noticed that even when I'm working here at Annex, is that my role here is to take care of people. And so that is draining to me. So as an introvert, I need to make sure I have some isolation. But yeah, the role of being on or being the person who's taking care of other people, it's actually way more draining than you would think.
Yeah. And I think people need to like sort of recognize that. Like, and I was talking the other day with a lady who said, oh, I do tons of self-care, but I always just feel so bad. And I'm like, but are you self-caring there though? Because if you go for a massage and the whole time you're getting that, you're thinking about how you should be at the office working and getting stuff done. It's not really self-care.
Right. But I think from my own experience, you can think that you're fine. Like when I was doing counseling, I thought I was fine for years.
Right.
And it wasn't until I was out of it that I realized apparently I was not doing self-care in the way. So it's not as cut and dry as we think it is, but you're right. It's really hard to turn that brain off. I have a hard time falling asleep sometimes because my brain just is thinking about business.
And so what sort of stuff do you do for that? Because I know I have that same thing. Like I have to, like, there's certain things that I know I can't do within like an hour of going to bed. Like I cannot read books or do research. Otherwise, forget it. It's 3 a.m. and I'm like, this is fun. Like this. And the older I get, I'm like, this is going to hurt tomorrow.
Exactly. So my strategy probably isn't very healthy, but this is what I do and I will share it with the world. So honestly, I have to have something to distract my brain so I can fall asleep. So I put in one earphone, like an old show or movie or something that I've seen a million times that I don't care about, but it's enough to make my brain stop thinking. And that helps me fall asleep. I have to engage it sort of.
And I'm totally with you. It's so funny. I can't believe I'm going to admit this, but I'm going to admit it anyway. So there was a thing that went out on Facebook that said, my son came to me and he's like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. You're on YouTube on this top 10 did you know thing. And I'm like, I am? Like, what for? And so he shows it to me and he's like, look, somebody watched the Bee movie, the one that had like Jerry Seinfeld in it. Somebody watched the Bee movie 365 times. And it's you. I swear it's you. For the longest time, that's how I would fall asleep because I would not make it past like the graduation scene. Like I would fall asleep. Exactly. But that was like I'm like, this is a horrible habit to get into, that this movie makes me fall asleep. And I apologize if for some odd reason Jerry Seinfeld ever listened. I love the movie.
Or else you wouldn't have chosen it.
Or I wouldn't have chosen it, but it did make me fall asleep. And I was so upset when Netflix took it off. I was like, what? There's my movie. But I'm the same way because if I don't do that, I find that for me, that's like a mind numbing thing. I can stop thinking about everything else and just concentrate on what the bees are doing or whatever the case may be. But it really does help me to shut down. And then I sleep better because otherwise I get all of these ideas and then I feel like I dream about work. And then I wake up and I'm like, well, I don't feel rested at all.
Yeah, I have not successfully, I'm sure probably I should say meditation or something, because I know a lot of people use that. That's not necessarily been a thing for me, but yeah, for me, I have to have something else to think about. I have to replace it with something that's kind of mind numbing, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, you have to I think it's true in what you said, you have to find what works for you. Cause I'm the same way. I've tried meditation before and I've tried the isolation, like, the tubes that you go into. And it always reminds me of like a Simpsons episode where Homer's in it and he's just singing. Like I just can't shut it off. Like I'm like, wonder what everybody else is thinking about. Like, and I'm like, oh, this would be a really great idea. And I'm like,
I could
no,
make this
you're
a
not.
business.
You're not quieting your mind at all. It's just I have such a hard time with it, right? But
That's you. So
I
maybe we
guess,
shouldn't judge ourselves. Just do what works.
yeah. And I guess, maybe our form of meditation is that movie that we're just shutting off and not paying attention to. So I think you're right that you have to find those things that work for you and not guilt yourself that it should be some, higher power, like, meditation. I exercise this much. I do all of these skills. Cause some of them I'm like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah. Well, and what you just said really hit me too, because you said we shouldn't guilt ourselves about it, because I feel like I think women anyway, but in business, I find myself very guilty if I'm taking a break or if I'm taking a nap, or I'm a major napper. I'm still doing that, but I do feel guilty about it. Like, oh, I should be making this business happen. I don't have any right to take a break or to take a vacation, even though I know I need that, but I still have a feeling of guilt about it.
Yeah. And it's true too. I remember for years, like we owned a franchise too. And I remember, we would go away and we'd have other people that would come in and take over, for us. And I remember thinking, I don't know why we bother going away. Cause when we get back, there's so much work to do. There's always something that needs to be fixed or somebody didn't do something the way we did. It would just be easier not to go away. And it took me like until getting rid of it that I was like, I really wish I would have enjoyed those vacations and just not gave a crap when I came back. Like, but you do, like, I found like I took that on myself, that everything anybody else did directly reflected on me. So I had to make sure that everybody else was perfect.
That's
Or
a good
what
point
I
that
had
I never
deemed.
talk about, is that it becomes so close to our identity that we have difficulty separating it. Like
Yeah.
if something is wrong with it, then there's something wrong with me.
Right. Yeah. And we connect those two, especially if it's, and I found it more when it was like more of a brand base, like when it was something that like it was me, when it was those
Yeah.
businesses, like my retail businesses didn't really matter, but those businesses that were more service based, that really I couldn't, like I was it. If I wasn't there, there was nothing tangible to sell. Like I had to sell me, like, here's my brain and you can have, have the business.
Which is good in some ways, because then, I mean, it's good that we identify with that business and that we're taking it seriously. Like you're standing behind that. And so you don't want to stand
Yeah.
behind something that sucks. But I mean, also should be maybe a limit on that.
And I think like it was probably after like my first 10 years of being in different businesses that I realized I don't want that anymore. I want businesses that I can have that opportunity to be able to walk away and be okay with it. And I think part of that was building my team and really being conscious about who it was that I was bringing on and how I was treating my employees. Because those really good ones I wanted to bring with me no matter what I did or where I went.
Mm-hmm.
And that to release a little bit more, because I knew I had those people that had the same values, that had the same ideas as I did. And now I go away and I'm like, do whatever. Just don't.
Which is amazing, because then the business goes from being just you, but it's them also. Like, that they're carrying it the same way that you would, sort of.
Yeah. And I think what it helped me to do was not only to be able to let go and not have the control issues that a lot of women and a lot of women entrepreneurs, get sucked into that real easy, like we do with our families. But it allowed my team as well, my employees, to be able to take more ownership in things and be able to speak up more. And now we do stuff that I wouldn't have thought of, but they were like, we should do this because that's what I want to do.
Yes. And I think most of the time I've been a solopreneur, but I did have some employees. And there's this feeling where you feel like you have to be self-sufficient 100%, which is ridiculous. Like it doesn't make any sense logically. But I think we often have that feeling where, well, I have to figure out the answer. It all has to come from me, which is very inefficient, like astronomically inefficient, when you could be using the ideas and resources and, knowledge of other people instead of just using one person's.
And I think that's too why I'm so drawn to stuff like the Annex Coworking that you have and stuff like that. Because it is that space where you can sit down and say, hey, I have this thing. What do you think about it? Because we get stuck in, we can't find the answers and then beating ourselves up. So do you find that the people that you have that come, do you find that they're sort of instinctually building that community just because they're in that sort of space?
Yeah, to a certain extent that does happen, but I also take steps to make it happen. So I have
Right.
all members are able to be a member of a mastermind group basically.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's not doesn't have a curriculum, but it's more of a traditional mastermind group. So it's a group of 5 women and I'm there as the facilitator, and we divide up the time and you have X amount of minutes to present what is going on with you, and then the group provides support, ideas, resources, whatever they can. And so that is like a solid way I can know that people are diving into community and relying on each other and growing together, because they may not be here the same day or may not see each other, but this way I know I'm building that strong community.
And is that so one of the pieces that are going to be over on like on the online course that you have going on?
No, I never thought of that, but that's a good idea.
There you go. You should do that.
There you
Because
go.
I love that idea of like getting together, because sometimes even just getting out of your own space. Like I know for myself, somebody can come to me with a business problem and I can give you an answer in like 2 seconds flat. I can be like, oh, here's some ideas. This. Like I can think of ideas for other people really, really easy. But I think when you think of yourself, you end up allowing those what ifs and, oh, I can't really do that. Or,
Yes, that's
you
true.
limit yourself. But when it's someone else, I'm like, okay, ready? I'm going to like get a pen. I'm going to verbal diarrhea. I'm just going to throw it all up.
For sure. And having those other people, they can reflect back the reality of your situation, right? Because we, like you said, we get lost in the what ifs, or we evaluate ourselves inaccurately all the time. And usually we see things much more negatively than they are. But having other people looking at you face to face going, no, that's not true. This is the actual reality. You're just not seeing it clearly.
Yeah. And I think that's true. Like I used to do that in the store. Like whenever I had like new items or whatever come in, I would ask people like, where would you see this? Like I'd let them organize the way the store was. Or for kids, I would let kids run in and I would see what they would look at. Right. Like I'm sure it was the oddest looking thing. I'd be crawling on the ground. People are like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm trying to look at the height of a 4-year-old. What does a 4-year-old see? Like, my husband's like, you are odd. And I'm like, people are coming in to ask what I'm doing.
Hey, it's advertising.
Whatever works.
But I think that's so good because you obviously weren't stuck in just trying to do your perspective. Like you were open to other perspectives, which is great.
Yeah. Well, and it was just easier to let other people do it. It was really what it came down to. I was like, I don't know. You tell me where you want it. I don't care.
I'll put it there. Sounds great.
So how can people find out more about your upcoming course? Because of course we recorded this in January, but it's going to be releasing in February. So it's actually opening tomorrow for those that are listening in. So where can people go to find out more about the online community? And as well, for those of our listeners that are in Texas, where can they go to learn more about the Annex?
For sure. So to learn about the course, my website is Carrie Hill Cares. It's CARRIE hillcares.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook. It's at Carrie Hill Cares. And then if you are in Texas, I'd love to see you at Annex. And that's Annex Coworking SA, that's San Antonio.com. Or on Instagram or Facebook, it's at Annex Coworking.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming today and chatting with me. And we're going to have all of the links where people can find everything. And I wish you the best of luck in the course. And I'm hoping to get to Texas soon. It's one of my favorite spots, but I'll definitely have to stop by and visit.
Okay, let's make crafts then.
Sounds good. Done.
Thank you so much, Tanya. I had a blast.
I had so many laughs with Carrie, and it was just such an honor for me to get to know her better. And I love the idea of the Annex. It's something that I think every community needs, a place where people, especially those that work from their home, can go to just have a professional atmosphere, take some courses, feed off of other people, and just find a sense of community. So if you're interested in creating your own annex in your community, I would suggest doing some research because I think it's something that it could be really successful. And I wished that my city had something like that when I started my first at-home business, because I think it would have been really beneficial to me. And even now that I'm well established and I've been in business myself for over 20 years, it's still something that would be nice. And I constantly hear people say that they wish they had a place that they could just meet with people. So who knows? You never know. One day that might be a business that I look into. If you have an annex that's in your community that you love or that you use, I want to know about it. So please message me or tag me in a post that you do and let me know who they are, where I can find more information about them. Because this is something that I think I want to dig a little bit farther into and see what other people are doing. Don't forget, you can always head over to our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages. You're always welcome to email me, and you can find all of this information on our website at foxtalksbusiness.ca. And like Carrie and I were doing in the episode today, talking about everything from crafting to what we do to fall asleep, make sure that what you're doing in your life, you're having fun. Because if you're not having fun, why are you doing it?